Hi, my name is Shaheen Pasha, and I'm an assistant teaching professor at Penn State University. I'm also the co founder and co executive director of the Prison Journalism Project, an educational initiative aimed at providing incarcerated men and women with the tools necessary to tell their own stories while also providing a publishing platform for them to get their stories out to the rest of the world and let people know what it's really like to be behind bars in the United States. I've been a professional journalist for about 20 years or so the First Amendment has always been at the heart of everything I do: freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But it wasn't until I became one of the millions of people in the United States who has a loved one, in my case, a best friend, serving time behind bars, that suddenly understanding the Eighth Amendment and what that really means to over 2.3 million people we have incarcerated in this country became an integral part of both my professional and personal life. The Eighth Amendment states, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. But every day, my colleagues and I at the Prison Journalism Project receive submissions, essays, poems, and letters that show us just how little the values of the Eighth Amendment get upheld in the current criminal justice system. Let me backtrack for a minute and give you a little bit of background. The Prison Journalism Project launched officially in September 2019 at Penn State to teach journalism to incarcerated men and women. Our goal was to create educational materials such as a textbook and a curriculum based on the work that my partners and I had done over the years behind bars. But once the pandemic hit and prison education programs around the world ground to a halt, we realized that we wanted to make sure that the men and women inside had the opportunity to have their voices heard and to be part of the historical record during this really crazy period in history. We launched an online publication and were stunned at how rapidly it grew as submissions from around the country poured in. We received poems and essays and fiction, and sometimes just simple letters and dispatches that let us know the conditions that they were facing. And we were even more saddened to see the common themes that emerged, that highlighting just how cruel and unusual punishment really is for the people serving time in prison. A number of writers told us how devastating it was to be sick and moved into solitary confinement to recover. The isolation, troubling sanitary conditions, the uncertainty of knowing what was happening to what little property they had left behind in their cells was really devastating to their mental health. We're being punished in a horrific way for the crime of being sick, when social distancing is impossible and illnesses are being brought in from the outside, one writer told us in a letter. The only thing they would let us out for is a phone call a day and a shower every 3 days, wrote another. And he added that as the virus worsened, so did their conditions inside. The takeaway from all of this is we'll be locked for 22 hours a day until they can get a vaccine. No one cares about us, he said. And one of the writers from a youth facility in Florida had this to say: I have been locked up going on 11 months. When I first got arrested, time was not that bad. But things have changed now. I think the most harmful experience I'm having is not being able to see my family. It is a hard transition from getting visitors every other week to none at all. Another hard experience, he wrote, is the online school. School with the teachers in person has been a lot better than this online school. When I needed help with my work, I could learn hands on, which is the way I learn. Now it's really complicated. And those are just the stories of men, women, and children who are already incarcerated. So many of our writers have told us the excessive bail amounts that they were handed, which started them on the actual path, the cycle of prison, when they couldn't pay and were then forced to stay behind bars until they received a trial date, were convicted, and then that just started them on that road. If we're talking about the Eighth Amendment, we have to examine how it's being violated across correctional facilities across the country. Torture is what we associate with cruel and unusual punishment. But if you ask our men, women, and children what torture means, they'll say it's isolation, lack of hygiene, lack of programming, lack of human contact, exorbitant fees, being working for pennies on the hour, pennies for days, and then having fees taken from that so that you just can't seem to catch up. For them, these things, these realities behind bars are torture. They are cruel and unusual punishment, and yet nobody seems to really address it, and it doesn't seem to be in any way, shape, or form changing in the United States. Here at the Prison Journalism Project, which is completely volunteer run from the executive director to our transcribers and our editors, we're trying to do our best to highlight these stories using the words of those who live it. Our hope is that they won't be forgotten and that those of us on the outside, who have the ability to maybe help, the situation, will consider getting involved with reform. The Eighth Amendment is a wonderful ideal. We shouldn't have torture. We shouldn't have cruel and unusual punishment. We should avoid excessive bail and exorbitant costs. And yet, those are very much a reality right now that we're seeing. And I think it's up to us to really set forward a path and try to do more work and try to help to make sure that the awareness is there in society that we can actually facilitate change. So I hope that you will also get involved and that you will learn more about the Eighth Amendment and just how it's implemented and how it's used and seen by the men and women inside. Thanks.